We have Elizabeth Cronin from Victoria Transit Riders Union with us. Thanks for presenting to us. 5 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for question, and you can begin whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Thanks everyone for having me. My name is Liz. I am a member of the organizing committee for the Victoria Transit Riders Union. And we're a group of users of transit in Victoria, and we're advocating for excellent and fare-free transit in Victoria, but also across the province. So the asks I'm making here today are to immediately, as soon as possible, make transit fare-free for all teenagers in the province and for all seniors in the province. And following that change, whenever it's feasible, given the constraints of acquiring more infrastructure required for providing transit, to eliminate fares completely within the province of BC. And this is something that's been tried both for specific groups and completely in various jurisdictions around the world. I won't list them all now, but you can look them up. But there has been some data that's come out of those places, and we strongly believe this would be a very evidence-based change to make in the province. Recently, we were advocating for this change with some teenagers who really want this to happen for their people who are also teenagers in different jurisdictions and who don't have access to free transit, and they do. You may be aware the City of Victoria has made transit fare-free for teenagers within the City of Victoria, but the kids in Esquimalt don't have that, and the kids in Oak Bay, they don't have that. We know that the Union of BC Municipalities has asked the province to make transit fare-free for people in grade 12 and under. We would prefer it be all people 19 years and under in the whole province, because some of the folks who aren't in school would be the ones who would need the change most badly. Social isolation, as we all experienced during the pandemic, is very, very harmful. It's really dangerous. It hurts your physical health and your emotional well-being as well. Social isolation is a challenge that seniors and youth face more often than other people in our society, so that's part of the reason we were hoping to start with those groups. There's a mental health crisis for young people in our society. A lot of that mental health crisis, I believe, I'm a mental health provider. I'm a trauma therapist, and I work at a nonprofit in Saanich, and I'm a registered social worker. I believe a lot of that is because of the moral distress people are experiencing when they're not seeing government make changes that need to be made in situations where there are really serious crises happening. And we're hearing many ideas about punitive and unhelpful and not evidence-based responses for some of these crises. And we need to have bold, progressive action that is based on evidence to actually address the crises so that people can feel cared for by their government and they can see their conditions improve in their daily life. So the affordability crisis and the climate crisis both would be really, really addressed by making fares go away on public transit in BC. You would see the biggest benefits, obviously, if you do it for everyone, but starting with the youth and the seniors, they would immediately feel that. And they wouldn't just feel that their life got easier, accessing things like healthcare, social opportunities, food, things that they need to care for themselves and for others. I believe that they would also feel that their government cared that there is an affordability crisis, that their government cared that there's a climate crisis. We're already hearing again on the news about the fires, and that really affects people's mental health. My clients tell me about it in my counseling sessions I do with clients, and they need to feel like action is being taken and it's being taken seriously. When you get to the point where you eliminate fares for the whole population, you get huge savings in the area of administering the fares. And we know that a lot of the funding for transit already doesn't come from the fares. It's so inefficient to repeatedly harvest money at the point of the use of this service. We are asking the government to make a smarter choice that benefits people. And we really believe that you would see savings, especially in areas like healthcare. I used to be an outreach worker, and I drove people to medical appointments. A lot of the times I was driving folks because they could not afford the bus fare. They couldn't get to their medical appointment, and I had to drive them. They also couldn't get to medical appointments leading up to that point when they could have taken care of their health a lot earlier. The ICU is very expensive, and it's a road that it takes people to get there. And if you provide people with freedom of movement, they will take good care of themselves. They will take good care of each other. In Montreal, they made transit free for seniors, and ridership increased by 15 to 20%. every single one of those visits, folks were taking care of themselves, they were taking care of each other's, their health was improving. And we really need that to happen in BC for these demographics and then for the whole population. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We'll go to questions by members. Any questions? Yes, MLA Blatherwick.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So one of the things you're talking about is an inequity of service across like a region. So say here where the city has declared transit to be free for teenagers. Now, is the city, because I'm from the Lower Mainland, so we have the BC, the TransLink model, right? Which is different than what happens here. So is the city of Victoria compensating the transit system, or what is the arrangement for?
So I'm not an expert on how they're administering that exactly, but we did go and we spoke to municipalities, and we were speaking at Oak Bay when Oak Bay was considering making a similar model. So I believe that the city is getting their own funds, paying for bus passes that then the teenagers use when they're on the bus, which costs money to administer as well. Anything where you're means testing, anything where you're giving passes to certain people, you really see the biggest benefit when you eliminate all of that. But we understand it would take time to scale up, and that's why we do think it is worth it to take the time to make the passes, do whatever it takes for the youth and the seniors to start.
Thank you so much. And when you're talking about transit, now here in Victoria, am I understanding correctly, transit is just bus space? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Again, Vancouver.
Yeah.
So the and when you're transporting, is there a system here where you have different buses for different routes? Like, so in Vancouver, we have like much smaller buses for less busy routes and bigger buses for, same here?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So when you're looking at a reduced transit model, has there been any research on, say here in Victoria, now that you've had this policy in place of free transit for teens, has there been an increase in ridership in Victoria?
That is a good question. I don't know the numbers for overall ridership. I do believe that I heard that the teens were using the bus more, and there was an increase in ridership in that demographic. Yeah.
That would be really useful to have. Is there an increase in ridership, and also is there a decrease in traffic congestion?
Yes. Yeah, the congestion thing is one of the areas where I believe our society could see the biggest savings. Apparently, just in the Metro Vancouver area, and this was in 2015, apparently congestion was estimated to cost between $500 million and $1.2 billion every year. And there's a really excellent article by Mark Lee, who is an economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, I believe. So in the Tyee, you can find an article called Why BC Should Make Their Public Transit Free. Being a social worker, I get very focused on the social side of this argument, but there is definitely this other congestion piece, and that was really prominently discussed in the Mark Lee article. Yeah.
Thank you. Recognizing MLA Rattay.
Thank you. Sorry I missed the beginning of your presentation there.
Oh, no
I was trying to make a phone call, but so I'm not sure if you touched on this or not, but are there any studies that you guys have done as an organization around proving that model out of why this would end up resulting in cost savings?
Well, we are quite a new organization. So as on the research side, we have been doing surveys with folks, and we're still working on compiling that information. So we haven't put together anything like what you're describing exactly. But I really strongly believe that you would see savings in things like healthcare. And I believe in general, just in the social science literature, it would be extremely evidence-based, and there would be research to support that.
If I can follow up, thank you. Just on another thing, kind of as I guess a bit of an anecdote, but there's a kind of a cross section here that I've got a lot of interest in around people that are unhoused using transit systems. And I've done a fair bit of research into this, and through discussions with BC Transit, I haven't had them with TransLink yet, but kind of as an interesting kind of side piece is they've really moved away from fare enforcement. because of some of the safety issues that they were facing.
Yeah.
So that is already a piece that's kind of been looked at. Now, my understanding from BC Transit was that TransLink does still do fare enforcement. I've not seen any evidence of that, to be honest. I have family in the Lower Mainland, and they've certainly not seen evidence of fare enforcement when it comes to at least particular populations, right? I've got one sister that uses the bus for work every morning, and she's witnessed frequently that there hasn't been fare enforcement, but obviously for her there is. So it's kind of created a bit of an inequitable system, and it's I think contributed to some of the stigmatizing that goes on, unfortunately. But it'd be interesting to maybe for your organization to have that conversation with BC Transit about their decisions to stop with fare enforcement with certain populations and what that has actually played out to do for BC Transit, right? As far as their bottom line and stuff.
Am I allowed to respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, so the fare enforcement piece, it was such a short time to speak, but that's one of the reasons we're so passionate about the elimination of fares. It is not safe for the transit operators, and we have our union of transit users. We've worked really hard to develop a relationship with local transit workers and with the folks in the union, and we know that many of them support fare-free transit, partly because they do face challenges at their work around fares that sometimes affect their safety. Mm-hmm. Also, with respect to public safety, we want them to be focusing on other things. Their job is very high stakes. They're driving, like there was just a death that had to do with operating a bus. And it's a very high stakes job. We don't want them to be counting money that people are putting in a little box. There's so much important work they need to do outside of that. My sister lives in Victoria, and she was stranded in Oak Bay recently with 2 children under 5 years old, and the bus driver wouldn't let her get on the bus because she didn't have the money. Mm. And so there still is fare enforcement happening.
It's just the certain population.
Yeah, and she's also seen them refuse entry on the bus to folks who are in extreme poverty and clearly unhoused, and had that impact her children because then an altercation has started at the front of the bus. We can't continue like this. There's growing extreme poverty in this province. We need to come from a place of welcoming people into services and not having these conflicts. And that's like one of the reasons we're really passionate about it. I'm so glad you brought that forward.
Presentation, and that ends our presentation for today.